Welcome to Grieving Insomniacs. I am your host, Cristi Habermann. I am glad you're here. Thanks for being a part of our community. A few disclaimers before we get started. I am a licensed therapist. However, this podcast is not to be considered mental health therapy or counseling. It is for entertainment purposes only and is not associated with my counseling practice, Cristi Habermann Counseling Services. Thanks for showing up. With Kai the Wonder Dog here in spirit, still struggling a little bit with doing this podcast without having her by my side. But she is missed and well loved. Sorry I've been gone. So one of the difficulties I had when Christopher died was because it was unexpected, it was traumatic, and I didn't get to say goodbye. So what do if there's an unexpected death and you don't get to say goodbye? Well, let's talk about just the concept of saying goodbye. I have noticed in our society, especially when you consider how many people get ghosted, they just end a relationship, but they don't take the relationship to the logical end, which is they just stop talking to people. And that's starting to become a norm in our society. There's some cultures where you don't say goodbye at all. One of the things that we do as therapists is when you end a therapeutic relationship, we do what's called termination, which is teaching your clients how to say goodbye. So you summarize the relationship, go over the things that they have learned, that you have learned, and just put an ending on the relationship. And it can take, 2 or 3 sessions, especially depending on how attached your client is to you. But we don't do that in friendships. We don't do that in just casual acquaintances. We don't say goodbye. So one of the things that we need to learn how to do is to say goodbye in our relationships. So what do goodbyes do? They provide closure to a relationship. They allow you to express your feelings, talk about how you were enhanced by the relationship, take care of what we call any unfinished business. And unfinished business has to do with feelings. Was there anything that was unresolved, anything that you wanted to say but couldn't say because you just were scared, thought you had more time to resolve it? So what do you do after that person dies? How are you going to say goodbye? And the other thing about saying goodbye, it's an older person and they are, in the active process of dying. You have the ability to sit with them and process your emotions of their absence, tell them how you feel, tell them how much you love them. But in a traumatic death, that's not necessarily the case. So you have to do it after they have died. And it's important for a person that is grieving to have the ability to do that. And so the first thing is to give yourself permission to say goodbye. So many of us, especially when it comes to our children, we don't want to say goodbye to our children. Our children mattered to us. They need to be here on earth with us. How do you process emotionally the fact that your child's not going to be there anymore? Well, it's difficult. And the process of saying goodbye can take months and years. But it's important, even if they aren't physically here, that your deceased loved one can hear, even if they're just thoughts, can hear what you're saying. Because then you can say goodbye to them or talk about your regrets with them and have the closure that you need in the relationship by just having that conversation in your mind, or having that when you journal it, or even when you speak it when you're alone in the car. You know that you can tell that they're listening. And so if you choose to do that, I would have you pay attention to how you feel when you do that. If you feel a feeling of warmth, how would you know if you were talking to your deceased loved ones and they got the message? How would you know that? That's the other thing to think about too, is if you decide to do this, is to think about, how would I know? And I'm not talking about a traditional goodbye. So when there's a traumatic death, we all have things that are unsaid. that we wanted to say, and we have a lot of regrets about that. That's the other importance of saying goodbye. So you're saying goodbye to one transition, which is where they had a physical body, and you're saying hello to a spiritual transition. And that is the life that you're going to have with them when they're in heaven or in the spirit world or wherever you believe they are. That's the start of another relationship. And so that's why there's the importance of that. The goodbye is the transition period. So you're saying goodbye to their physicality and saying hello to their spiritual side of them. And when I say spiritual side of them, I am referring to the fact that you might talk to them, you might meditate on them. People have different ways of connecting with their memories, their love of the child that they left behind. And that is a different process than actually saying goodbye. So people have various ways of doing this, but it's important that the unfinished business that you have with them, that you find a means to communicate with them. The other thing about saying goodbye, if you had been able to do that, you could express your respect and appreciation for them. That's one of my regrets with Christopher, is that I wasn't there to hold his hand. I wasn't there to tell him how much I loved him. I wasn't there for so many things. And I know almost everyone that has experienced a traumatic death has those same regrets. I wish I had been there when he was dying. I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that. And being able to say that to them and believing that they hear you can be very healing. And this is all part of developing a connection with the love and the memories that you had with them, because we all want to keep their memories alive. And so when I say talking about saying goodbye, I'm not saying you're going to put them in a little box and never think about them again, because as you know, that's impossible. I could never do that. I think about Christopher on a daily basis. When I was in Texas, I thought about Christopher, how much I wish he would have been able to travel like he wanted to travel. Wondering if he ever went to the part of Texas that I was in. I really don't know. He didn't tell his mom everything. He was a grown man. And so, I never stopped thinking about him. The other part of saying goodbye is that you don't want to have any regrets. So I'm not sure if I've talked about this very much on the podcast, but in 2020, my mom died. And according to my family, we were estranged. But when I found out she was dying, I wanted to reconnect with her. So she has a boyfriend. I guess he's a husband now. I don't know what he is, but he's a significant other. And my siblings, we were all denied the ability to say goodbye to her. We never got to have those last conversations. I was going to try to reconnect with her. And I called my sister and said, I'd like to come see Mom and try to resolve our estrangement before she dies. And I was told, well, yeah, I can come, but I can never address the fact she's dying. I can never say that she was dying. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm sure she knew she was dying. But we were all forbidden to talk about the fact that she was dying. And I feel robbed. This summer, I was hiking with my sister, and we were talking about Joe, who is her significant other, and how I still have hard feelings against him because he wasn't willing to address the fact that she was dying. He couldn't say goodbye. You can't talk to her about closure. You can't. And I have a lot of hard feelings about that. Like I feel robbed. I don't have any guilt about it because according to them, that was her choice. It wasn't my choice. So I was powerless to do anything different. And so I've had to learn to accept and not feel guilty about the fact that my mom died with us still being estranged. Would it have made a difference? I'm not sure. I've accepted my peace with that relationship years ago, but it would have been nice to have a conversation with her before she died. which I wasn't allowed to do, which is why I think the dichotomy of this is so interesting to me. Well, kind of the same thing happened with my grandma, too. I wanted to be there when my grandma died, and my dad wouldn't let me. He wanted to be there by himself. And I also, again, felt that estrangement. So the more I was trying to seek connection with these people, especially around this death situation, the more they kept me at bay. But I did have a moment when my grandma was somewhat lucid before she died that I know I turned around and looked at her, and by that time she had lost the ability to speak because she had dementia. I knew she was trying to say goodbye. She's also the one, though, that I'm having a hard time connecting with in spirit. She was old apostolical Lutheran, very religious. We have those beliefs, when we die, we take those beliefs with you. And so maybe that's part of the reason that, I don't feel that connection with her. Because even when they're sitting there, laying there, however you want to put it, in their coffin, and you have the ability to say, I'm sorry, you have all of these thoughts, you're crying, there's this sense of closure. You can at least process your emotions. When it came to my mom, she was cremated. There was no body. I never got to see her. There was no funeral. She refused to have a funeral. In that particular situation, there would have been no chance for me to say goodbye, process my feelings. But honestly, I had processed my feelings about my mom a long time ago, because I had to put to rest the idea that she would ever be a mom. So I think I went through my grieving process with her. But I'm telling you, after Christopher died, there was so much unfinished business with him, so much unfinished business, that I would sit in my car and I would talk to him, and I would go over all of the things that I thought were unfinished. I would journal all of the things that I thought was unfinished, because he was young. He was 25 years old when he died, and there was this importance of that. And so what I would encourage you is, when you think about the emotional processing that is part of saying goodbye to their physicality, when you think about the respect and appreciation you want to say to them for bringing love and joy into your life, and hanging on to the memories that you have of them. You want to be able to enjoy those memories and take part in those memories. And all of that is part of saying goodbye. And you don't know that they didn't have things they needed to do closure for you. So that's one of the things that my mom not having a funeral, because it wasn't just about me not having a funeral. My mom was estranged from everybody in her extended family. So her not having a funeral, kind of robbed her siblings and her cousins and her nieces. It robbed them from the ability to say goodbye also. And so they're walking around with their unfinished business too. So the importance of the unfinished business is to get it out of you physically. It's an emotion, right? That desire, the regrets, there's so many emotions wrapped up in the fact, especially when it's a traumatic death, that I didn't get to do, I didn't get to say. And all of that just gets into a muddy mess. And you kind of have to sort it out in order to move back to the new you. So as sorting out this process of going through these emotions, it'll lead you into some growth. And unfortunately, for the people that are listening that maybe have just started going through the grief process, you're going to come out on the other side a different person. There's no changing that. The moment that your loved one died, you're changed. You're different. And I don't know how to make it any better for people, besides tell them the truth. The person that you were before they died, some parts of you are not going to come forward with you into into the future, no matter how much you try, because we are so changed by this. So we can fight the change, or you can embrace the change. And as part of embracing the change is working out this process, even though you weren't able to do it in person. Like some people do it in the funeral. You can do the emotional processing, express your respect and appreciation. The closure piece, at least for people that have lost children, I think that takes much, much longer. The closure for others, most of that is done at the funeral. Communication and clarity. So this is the important part of when there's a traumatic death and working out how to say goodbye, is because I firmly believe in communication, and you need to communicate how you feel. I also say, when I'm working with clients, I say it's only important that you communicate your message. How the message is received is beyond your control. And so communicating how you feel, because we don't know how we feel. And so as this process of saying goodbye, of saying our unfinished business to our loved ones, you are enhancing your communication. You're developing clarity about that relationship. It took me a long time with Christopher to get to a place where I could accept certain truths about myself. And that is through having ongoing conversations with myself regarding his death, knowing that he was listening. And then if I was meditating, I would get these insights about what his thoughts might have been. And I just trusted that those insights were things that I needed to pay attention to and incorporate into my life. Because I don't believe Christopher was like a really good guy. I don't believe that he holds any grudges or some of the other things that his friends said and did. I just don't believe that. It just didn't match with his character. And after someone dies, and especially when it's traumatic and there's all these rumors and people saying things about how you should have done this different and how you should have done that different, it is really hard to hold on to what you believe about your relationship with this person, because you may find out horrible things about them after they died. Like, I found out that Christopher smoked way more than I thought he did. I found out that he was an alcoholic. These are things that I did not know about him, and it changed my relationship with him. And I didn't really have judgment about it. I had understanding about it. And so I started to accept that he was a person that was completely separate than me, had separate experiences than me, and had things that there was a life that I didn't know about. And, then there's the hurt about that. But as you work through this process of saying goodbye, you're going to have closure and clarity surrounding the relationship. And it's critically important, no matter which person it was that died. And then healthy detachment. So this process of ghosting, right? That's not healthy. That's not a healthy way to end a relationship. Invariably, one person is hurt. It's actually very cruel. And the other person is left wondering. Years. Someone can worry about what they did that got them ghosted. So you're actually being very cruel when you do that. And so when you say goodbye to your deceased loved one, you're healthily detaching from them, from the physicality of them. The relationship, whether we like it or not, changes in death. And then it becomes a spiritual relationship because we connect through love, we connect through memories. So it's important for you to understand my message. My message is that when the physicality of them, which means their physical body, dies, you have to say goodbye to that, because you won't be holding them anymore. You won't be kissing them anymore. You won't be talking to them anymore. And so it becomes a spiritual relationship where you engage in ritual. Ritual is very important. It's a way of honoring the person. It's a way of interacting with the person. It's a way of demonstrating your love in the spiritual realm. The concept is very similar to going to church. When you go to church, you pray for them. You know that they're there for them. You are there for them. So that concept is what I'm saying is detaching from physicality and moving more to emotional, memorial, spiritual connection with them. It also helps you preserve the memories that you have of them. I would highly recommend, if you're newly grieving, to write down some of your memories. I have found over time, and it's just part of being human, that some of my memories are clouded by the pain that I was in. And I became so focused on the pain that there's years of time between now and when Christopher died that I have no memories. I don't know if it was the pain of that. I don't know if it's my age because I'm getting up there, if it was the traumatic brain changes that happen. Because when your frontal lobe gets all overwhelmed with emotion, the memories never go into short-term memory, therefore can't go into long-term memory. And that's a critically important piece to remember. So if you can't remember the funeral, don't hate on yourself for that. Because when your brain is so overwhelmed with emotion, things don't go into short-term memory, therefore can't go into long-term memory. It's why there's so many people that experience traumatic events that don't remember, because it didn't go into short-term memory, therefore cannot go into long-term memory. So start writing it down. So some rituals that you can do. I did all of these in the beginning. I'm not so interactive on his Facebook memorial page anymore because I feel like I kind of talk about him on this podcast, but it was really helpful. People got tired of hearing me talk about him on my personal Facebook, so I did a Facebook memorial page where I put all of his pictures, everything I was feeling. I went to the grave for every holiday and I decorated. I still celebrate anniversaries where I make his favorite dinner, make him a plate, take it out to the grave, just knowing that this is my way of saying, Christopher, I loved you and I honor you and I honor that we still have a connection with you. Christmas time and Thanksgiving, I like to put food out on a plate for him also, including him in the process, including him in part of being with us. I wrote journal articles to him when I was journaling. I have conversations with him in my head all of the time. Music is another way I connected with him. There's so many different ways. And so I have developed this relationship with him, especially through the music, especially through these rituals that I do, and the regular communication I have with him in my head, and believing that he can hear me. Like I said, I have to do that for my mental health. Have to. Because the concept that I would not be able to communicate with him ever again was intolerable to me. And so that's where we were. So in summary, I just want to say, if you had a traumatic death of a deceased loved one, start working on ways to say goodbye to their physicality and transition over into a more spiritual connection to them through the love and the memories you have of them. I don't believe in, they die and they're gone. There's this theory of psychology called continuing bonds, which is the most successful way to manage your grief. And that's what we do, is manage it and incorporate it into who we are, is to move on into connecting with them through your love and your memories. And you can do that through a healthy way of saying goodbye. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at grievinginsomniacs@gmail.com. The quickest and fastest way is to get with me on Instagram or Facebook. Thank you for listening. I'll get back on a more regular recording schedule. It's been kind of hard through this month of travel, but we're back on track. Thanks for listening.